Hello, good day. My name is John Olisa, and you're welcome to another edition of Everything Real Estate. On this show, we discuss everything that has to do with real estate. If you recall, in our last edition in January 2024, we spoke about the short-let business. Today, I'm with an architect who has been in the industry for close to 3 decades, and we'll be looking at the topic of building from scratch, building a residential apartment from scratch. I know we have so many of us who want to build a house and we can't just wrap our head around it. How do I start building? How do I get land? What's the cost? I don't want to start and get stuck. What are the challenges I might face? And the likes. In today's edition, we're going to have answers to these your questions. And with me on the show, as I said, is an architect James Obaje. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
So before we start, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, my name is Enemako James Obaje. I'm an architect, and I've been in the industry, like you said, for over close on 3 decades. I didn't start in the industry as an architect. I started as a labor working on terrazzo floors, and that piqued my interest in construction. And then I went on to study in that line. I'm married and to one wife, one child, and that's basically it. What I do is construction, design and build, consultancy, that's construction consultancy, facilities management, and just the value chain. I play within the value chain of the construction industry at all levels. I've got a little bit of mining background, with aggregates, granite aggregates production and all of that. And then a little bit of business consulting, if you will, to just help young startup businesses grow their businesses.
Thank you so very much, Architect James. So the first question I have for you is, what should you do? What should you consider when you want to build? I recall last year, I was thinking about, building an apartment for people close to me. And I just wanted to have a rough estimate of how it all goes, but I was stuck before I could sort of find my way around it. So our viewers want to know, want to build an apartment for residential purposes. What are the requirements? What should we consider?
Okay, so there are broadly, nomenclature might vary, but broadly, you've got pre-design, you've got design, and you've got post-design. Those are stages to consider in a building project construction or anything construction related. Now, let's talk about the pre-design. Before we get to the design, let's talk about pre-design. So you want to build, you've got the intention to build. The question I would ask if you came to me is, one, why do you want to build? Are you building for personal use or are you building for commercial use? What I could term investment, right?
Business purposes,
for business purposes. Now, if you're doing either, before we even get there, another question to ask would be, do you already have the land? So you might want to know that, it might interest you to know that quite a number of persons who want to build might have come to that conclusion either by reason of opportunity. Say, for example, you had wind of a project coming to a certain location, and you've already your intention is to position yourself before that project commences, because value in land in that environment might appreciate. That is a prospection, and a projection, and you decide to position yourself. So that might necessitate you wanting to build, and the only way you secure the value in the land is to say, you buy and then create some value on that land. Either you're doing the fencing or you're doing some form of work that adds value to that land that now gives you opportunity to exploit it later on. So you might also have inherited land. So that would be the question I would ask. Do you already have land for building? Now, because when you say you want to build, what exactly do you want to build? Someone comes to, we hear this a lot, and a lot of designers will hear this. Someone comes to you and says, I want a small 2-bedroom. Newsflash, there is no such thing as a small 2-bedroom or a small 3-bedroom.
How do you mean?
because your requirements is what determines what can be done. That is on one hand.
Okay.
I'll get to that when we talk about design.
Okay.
But we're still talking about pre-design.
Pre-design, yeah.
So your land is what would determine what can be done on it.
The land. Okay.
Now, the type of land you have, you've got low density. You've got medium density. You've got high density. That density gradation determines what kind of dwelling units can be built and how many families or homesteads can be housed on said land.
Okay.
So we will investigate to say, okay, do you have land? Now, if you don't and you're intending to buy, it makes it easier because what do you want to build? That now helps us to say, when you're looking for land, this will be a fit for what you intend to build.
Okay.
Right? So you can't go looking for land that you want to use to build, say, for example, a 3-story building of 3-bedroom flats, and you're using half a plot. It won't work.
It won't. Do
you understand? If you're doing a bungalow, the requirements differ.
Okay.
You understand? And even within bungalows, you can have a bungalow that is 4-bedroom. You can have a bungalow that is 6 or 8-bedroom.
That's true.
So that's your requirements. When we come to the design stage, will determine even the land that you've got. So your land that you've got will constrain us to set it. We call it design constraints. It will give us constraints with what can be done.
Okay. So before you go into the design stage, so would you advise that a prospective homeowner gets professional advice before they even buy land or after they buy land? Because with what you're saying now, there's a sort of constraint, or there could be a constraint if you already have land and you already have in mind what you want to build, then the land is now restricting you. So what do you advise?
Now, it's tricky.
Okay.
It's very tricky because sometimes people come into, for example, if you inherit land, there's very much little you can do with regards to what you can do with the land. Now, if you were intending to buy, that's why I was saying if you wanted to buy. Now, if you're buying for business purposes, we all know that location is a key factor to business. Right. If you're buying for business purposes, say for example, residential, you want to use it for either Airbnb or you want to rent, you want to consider the proximity to, say, a tarred road. You want to consider proximity of infrastructure, say water in that location, electricity, and maybe other facilities like markets, hospitals, schools, security in terms of police positioning. And you want to consider as well proximity to shopping malls and all of that, so that your needs within that environment are easily met. Okay, those are things that you want to consider before you buy the land. So in that regard, it will be good to consider, talking to a professional in the industry, a realtor, an estate valuer, a land, someone who sells land and all of that. They'll be able to tell. In fact, it is important because you don't want to commit monies and then buy land in a place that is vulnerable.
That's true.
A place that maybe has been earmarked by government for some other development that is not suited to what you want to do. Or it could even be that the land owners in that environment are selling. Okay. That will bring me to what I was going to say about opportunity. Maybe you heard of an opportunity that land is cheap in this environment, people are selling, and then you get wind of that, and you want to position and you want to pick it up. Why are people selling? You want to do due diligence to find out.
That's true.
In most cases, you might find out that maybe government has earmarked that area for some other development, or another development is coming there that is affecting certain lands in that vicinity, and the owners are selling off to be able to hedge their values. That's true. you unwillingly or unknowingly go and buy something that becomes a liability for you. So you want to consider doing some due diligence and asking a professional to help you out.
All right, thank you so very much. So you really shed light on the pre-design stage. This is like even before we start up the work.
Yes, even before you start.
So what happens in the design stage?
Okay, before we even also get to the design stage, another question to ask is, now you've got the land. Is the land surveyed? Do we have beacon numbers that clearly delineates what the portion of land is, so that we know when we get to site, we're not going to be having issues finding the boundaries of your land.
And possibly encroaching
Exactly.
on other lands.
So in the pre-design stage, there are a few things we might want to do. You might want to have a surveyor come in and have a proper survey done on the land.
Okay.
Now, as a professional, the first question I always ask before I go to site is, what are your documentation for the land? So that we can, because when we want to prepare drawing documents for your project, or what we call working drawings, you don't want to go into development control to say I want approval, and then we cannot get approval because your documentation is sketchy.
So can you just tell us some of these few documentation?
Okay, so we might want to do a soil test.
Okay.
To be sure. Now, this is only required when if we're going to do a structure that is maybe higher than one floor and above, you understand. For a bungalow, you may not necessarily need that for approval purposes. But it's good, it's advisable to have it so that you just are clear what you're going to be able to do, on the property. You want the survey done. You want to be sure that there's either a C of O, an R of O. Sometimes some people buy community land and all of that. Now, each stage of this documentation limits what you can do and then limits your potential to sell.
That's right.
So my advice would always be, go for the highest point, which is the C of O, because it gives you freedom as a professional working on your site. I am convinced and comfortable that anybody that comes, I'm talking about with government officials, interfacing with them will be very, very easy because your documentation is squeaky clean and it's in order. Now, that can also be something we pursue through the design stage and all of that, getting your documentation in order. Now, we're coming to your design stage question.
The design stage.
You will require some professionals involved, but I'm an architect, so usually you will get to an architect to say, oh, I have an intention to build. So we'll come in and take a brief of what you want to build. Now, having taken your brief, we do it in two ways. We could take your brief before we visit your site, or we could visit your site and together with you, do a site inspection. Now, what we do on a site inspection is these things I'm talking about. We look at the proximity to roadways. We look at the proximity to infrastructure. Is there presence of electricity poles and all of that? What's the water situation? Because these things will determine what we do on your site. Now, if there's no water in the environment, you might have to drill a borehole. That will add up to the cost of your project. Now, if there is water board in the vicinity, we will now want to interface with the water board to get it connected to your site. We want to interface with the AEDC or whatever other
government agencies
or Genco is in your area and all of that to bring electricity into your site. So for me, at the design stage, what I would consider are those things, because if I'm going to be effective in delivering your project, you want to have water on site, you want to have electricity on site. Those are the two considerations.
So whether it's AEDC or IKEDC, that's in Lagos, so
whatever vicinity,
the disco.
Yes, the disco in charge of that environment, you want to be sure that we are interfacing with them to know what the possibilities of bringing electricity into your site, interface with them to get your metering in place so that you're not doing anything illegal.
Yeah, that's true, because once you do illegal tampering, I know there are charges that will be slapped on the defaulter.
And if it's in a developed vicinity, we want to check, for example, if your certain developments, certain districts already have central sewage lines. And there's a government agency in charge of that. You want to contact them to say, okay, look, we're doing a project and we'll be connecting to this central line. So you don't have to do your own personal sewage line. So all of those things are things that happen in the design stages.
Then what's up in the post-design stage?
Okay, we've not concluded on the professionals that you need at the design stage. When you meet the architect, most often the architect, depending on the project type, if you're doing a bungalow, you might just require the architect, the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer, and maybe a builder for that kind of project. But the more complex the project, the more professionals are required. Structural engineer will be required, and then special specialty engineers. For example, if you wanted to install a pool, if you're doing a healthcare facility, you might want to bring in some healthcare consultants who will help with the installation of very sensitive equipment that are relevant to, you know, that facility carrying out its functions. If you are doing a project for the military, you will need military consultants to give you some interventions with regards to how certain things are done, you know, for their own optimal operations. So those are considerations to have at that stage. And then when you get into, that's design stages.
All right. Thank you so very much. Then what now happens in the post-design stage?
Yes, post-design stage is everything that includes, now we've concluded your designs. At the design stage is where we get your project approvals. So we put in project approval documentation, right? You make all the payments and all of that. We interface with all the relevant government agencies and get all the approvals and permits. Then we come into site. Then when we get to site, we break ground, you know, we that's all post-design. We're building your project where everything from mobilization through construction, through handover and all of that, and even facilities management is all post-design.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so very much for that. So how important is it? Because for me, I'm very particular about regulatory compliance.
Okay.
So how important is regulatory compliance? Before we even go to further question, is it in the building sector, in building your house? How important, how much attention should possible homeowners pay to regulatory compliance?
Well, let me give you an example on a project fairly recently that I worked on. It's a 3-bedroom block of flats, with a maisonette on top, a 4-bedroom maisonette, and it's on 3 suspended floors.
Okay, so you have the ground floor.
Yes, you have the ground floor, first, second, and third. Yeah, you understand. Now it's a project that we did on live rock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a very constrained project.
Yeah.
Now, when we designed initially, we had a basement floor involved.
Okay.
Now, by the time we got to site, we had to make some adjustments. But the client kept on trying to, as normal with clients, because the economic situation kept on increasing the project cost. And he was very concerned about us overshooting the project estimated cost. So we had to see how we could get to site as quickly as possible. But we insisted that we must have approval before we do anything on site.
That's true.
And it would interest you to know that when development control eventually came on site, they had to let the client know that if we had not insisted and the client had gone ahead, he would have paid a hefty fine. Now I will give an amount. He would have paid 6 million.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the project approval cost was just somewhere in the region of 1.5.
So you would have paid 4 times.
4 times the amount.
Yeah, because why I'm asking this question, because of particular importance. As a realtor, I speak with some people who have distrust in the real estate industry. There'll be like some developers, they've already started developing and we hear of demolition. Now, they never know the reason for the demolitions. This is one of the reasons when you're building without building outside the approved plan.
No, there's two ways.
Reason.
There's 2 ways.
Okay.
You could be building without approval. That attracts a more costly reprimand.
Okay, well, let me put it this way: not necessarily building with a plan different from what was approved.
Yes. Now, if you're let's be honest.
Okay.
When you go on site, site constraints can necessitate changes to the original design.
Okay.
Where that is required, there is provision for you to revisit the approval drawings with the relevant authorities to say, okay, look, this aspect of our design is changing for this reason. Now, if they are notified and they give the approval, there's a process for that. And it usually is not, now it's usually not as expensive as the original approval documentation. Just some additional tweaks. And most times, it's either the developer is not patient enough or the professional is not patient enough. We're in this industry and there are leeways that can be granted you if you liaise with the relevant agencies because they are in the process to help you do the right thing.
That's right.
So we should, and that's my advice, never look at the agencies that have oversight as enemies. They're partners in progress, so that we all do, because you as a professional, and that's my own take, I may not be there after the project is complete, but someone's life and someone else's livelihood is at stake.
That's true.
So you don't want to put that at risk. So I would rather do the right thing, however long it takes. That's my advice.
Thank you so very much. I'm very particular because this regulatory compliance plays a very key role. It saves you problem in the long run. It's just having to do with sticking to your guns and doing the right thing, irrespective of whose ox is God. All right, thank you. So you've gone through the pre-design, the design phase, and the post-design phase. Okay, so for me personally, I love to know everything that happens. I love to have a basic understanding of everything. So let's take, for instance, now, I want to build a duplex.
Okay.
So can you just sort of give us the rundown of the bit by bit? Because one of the whole ideas behind this channel is to make people have an understanding of the one-two thing. So if I want to build like a duplex, a 4-bedroom duplex, what comes first? Is it foundation? When does piping come in? When does lighting come in? When does plumbing come in? Can you just sort of give us like a run through? So if you want to build like a duplex, how long will it take you to do that?
Okay. Again, like I pointed out, the particular that it's called a duplex does not necessarily mean that I can give you a time frame.
Okay.
So for example, if we went, let me do this. I'll do this with two types of buildings. Now we are going to do for the bungalow.
Okay.
Now, if we're coming to do a bungalow, say 2 bedrooms, or let's say 3 bedrooms that can house a family of 4.
Okay.
Right. And standard sizes, 3 bedrooms of 4 by 4 meters for the rooms minimum. You know, that's a very, very standard sized room for a project of that kind.
Okay.
Now, we will first come to site, clear up your site, prepare the site to receive building materials, delineate where we are going to now have those building materials coming, such that they do not obstruct the actual construction work.
So clearing of the site.
Clearing of the site. Then we will mark out the building lines to ensure that, because for example, every district have building lines.
Okay, what do you mean by building lines?
The point where your building must, all building lines must align together on a street, for example. So you cannot now come and give your own recess too much from what the building line is. Now, if that restriction is not there and there's freedom to now set out your building line as you want, then we will just go ahead and set out as you want. Okay. Then when you've set out the building lines, the building itself, you now begin to dig out the foundations. Okay. Depending on how complex the site is, how much space we've got, we might evacuate the materials that have been dug out. Yes, have been dug out. Then you now begin to set out your foundation footing. Then you do the block work out to the, if you're going to do a DPC, as in
what's a DPC?
That's the damp-proof course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if you're going to do a German floor, yes,
possibly water from the foundation,
ground floor.
Because it's a prevailing issue in Abuja. You see many times houses soaking water. So could that be reflective of not having good DPC?
No, it wouldn't be necessarily not having good DPC, as opposed to different treatments that are required at that stage to prevent such moisture coming up. The truth of the matter is, as much as you can restrict it, water always finds its level. Oh, that's true. Water always finds its level. It's not always ground floor water that can cause such kind of issues. Whilst it's mostly contributory, you know that fall off on the building walls itself can equally affect. So it's basically the treatment of the floors at that level that will determine whether you can restrict that from happening so much.
All right. So we are continuing from where we stopped. We talked about the foundation, going to the DPC level. Then
Yes.
what comes next?
Okay, so now you've done your German floor. You've cast the German floor.
Okay.
You want to form the blocks. Now, when you do the forming, you're able to check whether it aligns with what's on your floor plan.
Okay.
Right. Then, now for me, I do a special thing when I do the forming, just to tackle this water thing you talked about. I usually will cast either one block or two blocks off that forming to further, prevent moisture,
from
yes, capillary
coming
action.
up.
That's what it's called. That's the professional term. Capillary action from occurring. Okay, and then you now form to window sill.
Okay.
At that point, you now delineate where your windows are going to be, where your openings are going to be, doors, windows. You understand? And then you take it up to lintel.
Okay.
Tie it up. Take it up to roofing. That's this for the bungalow now.
Yes.
And then you put in your roofing.
Okay.
Now, after you've put in your roofing, you can now start doing your plastering. You can bring in your windows, install your windows, install your doors. Of course, at the block stage, before you do your plastering, you will do the piping for the electricals.
Okay.
You will do the piping for from the plumbing. I omitted to say that when you first do your block work out before you do the German floor, you will do piping as well.
Okay.
For all stages, whether it's a story building or it's a bungalow, you do piping at that stage.
Okay.
But it's only piping for plumbing.
Okay, at that stage, since
that
it
stage.
is possibly to the sewage system and the likes.
Yes, because when you come to site, right, the first thing after clearing, one of the things you also do is to set the levels.
Okay.
You transfer levels. What's the roadway level? We determine what's the ground floor level. I mean compound level. What's the finished level for the building? What's the ground floor level in the building going to be? In some instances, some people decide to make the ground floor level in the compound the same level with the building. It's not advisable.
Okay, why is that not advisable?
Because ground floor runoff, water runoff can come into your building. Now, in the event of a flood in the environment, you want it to be that your building is at least protected, elevated above the ground floor, as in the compound floor. Now, in some instances, depending on where your land is located, the roadway might be higher than the compound. Not advisable, because that means water runoff can come into your compound. But where that is unavoidable, you can extend, elevate your own building floor finish so that it's above the compound ground floor. So those are things to consider. So you've put in your roofing, you've done the plumbing that's the piping plumbing for plumbing, the piping for electrical. You've done that. You've done your plastering, you've put in your windows, you've put in your doors. You've started finishing, basic finishing. That is, some people want to do POP ceilings and all of that. You want to bring in. At that point, you now start drawing your wires, putting your electrical fittings, putting your plumbing fit. So you draw your wires, right? Then you go on to do your tiling. Now this sequence is important because electrical wires have to be drawn before you do your tiling. Because once you've done tiling, it becomes tedious and difficult and costly to now make corrections. Okay, so you do that, you put in your sockets, you put in your plumbing fittings, then you can now start painting and cleaning out.
That's true.
Cleaning out and clearing out the site from
all
debris. Now, if you have a story building on above, in the case of what the first question you asked, what you now do is you prepare the next floor for casting the floor that will receive. So you begin to do your floor reinforcements. In this case, at the early stages, you would have a foundation footing that will have columns coming out that are reinforcements. Now, the right sizing of reinforcement will be required for the kind of building you're carrying. Right. So if it's above one floor setting, you might want to use Y16. You understand? And the higher it goes, the higher the.
So what is Y16?
Y16 is a gradation of steel. That
sort of supports the weight
of it's the steel that you get from the structural drawings. The structural engineer will be the one to advise. In some instances, they might advise if the building is not the reinforcements, if the column specifications in terms of the distances are not so much, they might tell you to use Y12. Right? If cost is a factor, they might tell you to use Y12. But if and where you are able to accommodate the cost, Y16 is usually the standard for story buildings and all of that.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you so very much. Still on this building. So I just love tall buildings. I love skyscrapers.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in my room, I have a picture of the Burj Khalifa
Mm-hmm.
posted out, and I also have, I think, a picture of Leonardo by Sugimoto,
Mm-hmm.
the luxury.
Okay.
So I love skyscrapers and tall buildings.
Mm.
But I want to know, is there a commercial advantage for building tall or building high buildings over spread out buildings? Could there be an advantage? Like, so I'm thinking economically, is it sort of cheaper if you have limited land to build high than to build spread across?
Thank you very much for that question. You've answered it in a way
Okay.
by asking, is it advantageous if you've got land constraints?
Okay.
Now, nobody has unlimited funds.
That's true.
Okay, so and even when you have unlimited funds, depending on the area, remember we talked about location.
That's
if you are
true.
building for commercial purposes, the district where you want to build may not have as much land available for your kind of intention.
Okay.
So you might want to make do with what you've got.
Okay.
Right. And it's definitely more advantageous to go up because
Okay.
where I would have normally been constrained to do just a 3-bedroom on a small plot of land.
That's
if
true.
it is high density, I can go up to as much as 6 dwelling units by adding floors.
Wow, wow, wow.
That means I can maximize
Your space.
the space to make more. Okay, so it's economically more advantageous.
Okay.
Right.
But what's the downside? I also want to know the downside, if any, to building high.
Oh, the downside, as usual, is that you have more people in a concentrated space.
Okay.
That, it's not like something we want to encourage, but
that's true.
When pandemics come, it poses a higher risk.
Okay.
Yeah, of contagion and all of that, because you can't control everybody. And then, of course, human beings being what we are,
that's
very
true.
complex beings, not everybody will agree. And so you might have some difficulty managing the human elements involved. Those are, some of the things that could come up.
But do you think building high-rise buildings could sort of help to solve the, will I say, land issue in Nigeria and housing issue? Because I'm of the opinion that to an extent, I was in a fireside chat, real estate fireside chat last week or 2 weeks ago, and one of the constraints we say we have in Nigeria for mass housing is land availability, expensiveness of land, the cost of land.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that if we have like multi-family units like we have in the US, where you see some high-rise buildings like 1,000 units, 500 units. So I'm thinking, do you think if we have multi-family units, maybe high-rise, 5 floors, 10 floors, maybe 100 units, but 10 floors spread out over 10 different ones, do you think that can help to a very great extent to tackle the 28 million units housing deficiency we have in Nigeria while still conserving space? What's your take on that?
My short answer will be yes.
Okay.
However, as you know, like I just pointed out, you asked me about the downside to having that many people in a constrained space. It will be that you can't control what the different tastes will be, what the different value systems will be. Some people will be neat, some others will not. How do you manage a facility of that size in terms of the infrastructure?
That's true.
Okay, how do you keep people compliant?
That's true.
So those are things that if we can work out, it'll be easy. How do you, once you go above 4 floors, you need a lift.
That's true.
How do you manage, and our power issues here? So you'll have to be, this question is a constraint on designers. It's the onus is on us to provide solutions that makes this realization of the 28 deficit, cutting it down, a reality. But it means we have to be innovative and creative in our thinking. And then we also have to, I believe in design for humanity by making designs that help people to live better.
Okay.
That's what I believe. So the short answer is yes, but there's a lot of constraints to work through before that becomes a reality. In the meantime, we can make do with what we've got and keep pushing the boundaries as much as possible to see what we can do.
Thank you so very much, Architect James. I wanted to ask you more questions on professionals we require. So apart from the architect, Are there other professionals needed in building your house from scratch?
Oh yes, absolutely. Depending on the complexity of the project.
Okay.
Like I said, if it's a bungalow, you might need just the architect,
Okay.
the mechanical engineer, the
Okay.
electrical engineer. Now, I would go to say something after I've said this, and the builder for
Okay.
that stage. Now, usually it's the architect that recommends
Okay.
these people because they're consultants that work with him because the architect is the
Like the
head of the building
project.
of the project team. Yes, but being human beings being what they are, sometimes the contact comes from somebody else. So depending on who brings who on the project, it might determine who is involved. But these are the people you would need. Now, if you go above a floor, that means if we are having one suspended floor and above, a structural engineer will have to come in.
Okay.
Now, depending also again on what type of structure it is, more specialty consultants will have to come in. For example, if the project requires that we have gas in the place, a gas expert will have to come in to now determine what kind of piping system we're going to be using, what kind of facilities or equipment we'll have to use for that to be possible, the metering system, all of that, in conjunction with the electrical engineer. Now, if we have specialty installations, for example, you want to do solar inverter systems and all of that, because most people like to have smart buildings, you will have to have a smart building consultant come in who can advise, right? And then we will now know that the reason why this will happen, because this all happens at the design stage mostly, is to be able to capture the project cost
before you even set out.
So you're not going to have cost overruns. Most times, if you tackle these things at the design stage, your project runs smoothly. Where you have projects having issues is where project deliverables are changing in the midst of the project.
That's true.
There is a type of project that accommodates that. It's called fast track projects, where you are designing as you build.
Okay.
Yes, so there is that possibility. I don't want to make it seem like you have to tackle everything. Depending on the timing, the client's requirements, we can go for that. But you must have it in mind that you will be having so many cost overruns as a result of unforeseen things happening. It becomes difficult for project scheduling because, for example, we do something that we thought we finished, and then some other constraint comes and we have to dismantle, and then refit and all of that. It creates so many problems.
Thank you so very much, sir. Another question I have is that I think we've already discussed the stages of a building, right? So how important, I want to hear your views on this because I'm still very particular about seeking the advice of professionals. So how important is getting professional advice before starting up a project?
Okay. Now, this is very important. I was going to say this. The knowledge you have of the industry, the knowledge you have of the markets,
that's true.
These are things that will determine whether you contact a professional. That notwithstanding, you would need at least an architect and a builder.
At least
an
for even the minimum of projects.
Right, of projects. An architect and a builder, because the architect designs. Most times, for example, I'm a design build consultant, so I can equally build. Now, but where you have an architect, for example, a graduate architect that came, or a student architect that is, let me not use student architect, a graduate architect who just is fresh out of university and is on his first project. The experience level, even though he will have oversight from a more senior architect, you want to be able to have someone who is familiar with the building process. And that's a builder that will help midwife that process. You understand? Haven't done many projects back to back to back, I can advise. But even me, at my level, I still have a builder on my team that must be on site.
So it's that important.
It's very important.
It's very important.
Very, very important.
Thank you so very much, Architect James. You really opened our eyes to so much needed in building a house from scratch. So what are your parting words for our viewers?
Oh, awesome. It's been an awesome time having this conversation. We live in a country where sometimes things are not done right. My advocacy has always been to do the right things. So if you are considering building, or you already have land, or you're thinking about building, just do the right thing. Contact a professional. May not necessarily be me, but if you want to, you can contact me. I will give you the best advice possible. But contact a professional, and please follow the advice of the professional. Follow the advice of the professional, because the professional is not just there to make money, but is there to make sure that you get value for that money that you will eventually pay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Architect James, and thank you so very much, my viewers, for staying with us this far on everything in real estate. In this show, we discuss everything you need to know about real estate, because we are so particular on knowledge dissemination. We have the view that the more you know how a thing operates, the higher your chances of success and lower your chances of failing. So that's why we bring professionals from time to time to educate you on how to do real estate, so you do it the right way. This is John Olisa saying thank you for watching. Please endeavor to subscribe to this channel for more educative content on real estate. This is John Olisa and Architect James saying bye.
Bye.